Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and today I'm going to be going over Chapter 3 of Book 1 of Book 4, Liber ABA I, Magick, and the topic is Yama and Niyama. So let's begin. Yama is Sanskrit for restraint. In the yogic system of Indian philosophy, it's the first of the 8 stages intended to lead the aspirant to samadhi, or state of perfect concentration or union of subject and object. Niyama is Sanskrit for rules, guidelines, or observances. For Chapter 3 here, there's a Bilhydric footnote which appears on the word Yama, informing us that Yama will be dealt with in full in Book 2, Chapter 6, The Wand. That already tells us that Yama has to do with focusing with intent through a medium. The wand is all about higher aspirations and applying one's will with laser precision. When people unacclimated to the law hear, "Do what thou wilt," they immediately misunderstand and think Thelemites are carefree hippies that justify immorality through religion. First of all, this is so because they are probably accustomed to the throes of Christianity that has been abused by charlatans to justify any amount of immoral lunacies upon things that religion doesn't actually mandate. Secondly, the Lema and Magick is actually nothing less than severe and utter discipline. To do one's will, they can only do what they have incarnated to do, nothing less, nothing more. Further, to get to the point that one can actually do their will, they must have weeded out their character defects, determined who they are by radical introspection, disciplined their mind and body to obey them, and then test their knowledge they receive through their magical regimen of practices and thought experiments to be certain that what they've learned about themselves is in fact accurate. Now, what are the restraints and guidelines that are to be implemented? Yama again being restraints, and Niyama being guidelines. What are these restraints and guidelines? Corwley begins this chapter by writing, quote, "The Hindus have placed these 2 attainments, Yama and Niyama, in the forefront of their program. They are moral qualities and good works, which are supposed to predispose to mental calm. Yama consists of non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, and non-receiving of any gifts." End quote. Keep the idea of mental calm in the forefront of your mind as I continue. Corwley goes on, quote, "In the Buddhist system, sila, virtue, is similarly enjoined. The qualities are for the layman these 5. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt drink no intoxicating drink. For the monk many others are added. The commandments of Moses are familiar to all. They are rather similar, and so are those given by Christ in the Sermon on the Mount." End quote. Now a footnote informs us that Moses' teachings on right living were, quote, "not, however, original. The whole sermon of Jesus is to be found in the Talmud, but note that the Talmud was written several hundred years after the alleged coming of Christ, so make of that what you will." Now, our present chapter states, quote, "Some of these Yama and Sila are only virtues of a slave, invented by his master to keep him in order. The real point of Hindu Yama is that breaking any of these would tend to excite the mind." End quote. To paraphrase the next portion, what Corwley goes on to tell us is that, yes, these ideas that the yogis preach, which are certainly in conformity with beliefs of the Jews and even Christians, are certainly virtues that should be adhered to as best as possible. But it is obvious that the reason for doing so goes right over the head of the layman. They are meant to be implemented by the yogi as means of restraint to keep the mind calm and thus focused. This focus is the bare beginning of discipline, but a necessary one. Corwley jokingly says that to adhere to such virtues without understanding is ludicrous. Quote, "Non-killing, which originally meant do not excite yourself by stalking tigers, has been interpreted to mean that it is a crime to drink water that has not been strained, lest you should kill the animalcula. But this constant worry, this fear of killing anything by mischance is, on the whole, worse than a hand-to-hand conflict with the grizzly bear. If the barking of a dog disturbs your meditation, it is simplest to shoot the dog and think no more about it." End quote. Of course, This is being facetious to make a point that one can go crazy trying to implement such ideas without understanding why they are implementing them, nor will they ever attain magically just doing things without deeper understanding of why. Also, Corwley's joke does not take into account such things as karma, but that is a subject for a later time. When I worked with students, I tried my damnedest to get them to comprehend this following point, and it just seemed too difficult for them to accept, but here it is. Quote, "We may then dismiss Yama and Niyama with this advice. Let the student decide for himself what form of life, what moral code will least tend to excite his mind. But once he has formulated it, let him stick to it, avoiding opportunism. And let him be very careful to take no credit for what he does or refrains from doing. It is a purely practical code of no value in itself. The cleanliness which assists the surgeon in his work would prevent the engineer from doing his at all." End quote. First of all, seek humility in your practices. Avoid spiritual pride and feelings of superiority as if they were the plague. Yet without fear, only for the sake of doing what is right for yourself, doing it for that sake alone. By this line of thinking, we must strive to know ourselves. Though to a great extent I believe that most people know a great deal about who they are at their core, and whether afraid to admit it out loud or silently to themselves, they know. So casting fear to the wind, I urge everyone to begin to apply that knowledge now and outline what lifestyle is best suited to you achieving magical attainment. What do you find moral and immoral? What do you need to keep your mind focused at the beginning solely upon learning what your will is? Then later on, upon knowing for certain what it is, how can you do that and nothing but that? How do you remain detached absolutely and yet do your will with the passion and ecstasy of joy? What do you need so that you will not be perturbed by sadness, grief, happiness, etc.? How do you do your will regardless of what is happening around you or chemically within your mind? For beginners and advanced students alike, Corwley ends this chapter with sources that are of the utmost importance to this topic. Quote, "Ethical questions are adequately dealt with in the and Tao in the books Kong Som Pax, and should be there studied. Also see Liber 30, Liber A of the AA. Also in Liber 220, the Book of the Law, it is said, 'Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.' Remember that for the purpose of this treatise, the whole object of Yama and Niyama is to live so that no emotion or passion disturbs the mind." End quote. In the description below, you will find a link to my verse-by-verse video breakdown of Liber A, and also a link to Corwley's commentary of Liber ABA. Both of these are beautiful guidelines to life and attainment. Lifelong study and implementation of these principles is the most beautiful path I've found to date. Also, if you're new to either the occult or spirituality in general, you might want to take a look at Liber Oz and ask yourself line by line, what way is best for you to speak? What thoughts that tend to come into your mind are good for you to do your will? What thoughts come into your mind, if you've noticed any, that stop you from doing your will or stop you from being your most authentic self? How is it that you'd like to dress, present yourself to others? Who is it that you love? Do you really know yourself on that intimate of a level that you've come to terms with either gender, sexuality, who you are, who you were born, who you were told you were for your whole life, as opposed to who you really are? Maybe go line by line and use Liber Oz as a guideline to figuring out some of the things about yourself. It might be a very bare-bone beginning necessary step if you're having trouble grasping what are your moral codes, what do you find moral and immoral. I just want to end this with a sort of little blessing and encouragement. So, may Nuit be your refuge as Hadith your light, and Heru Raha the strength, force, vigor of your arms, as you walk in light and love towards the liberty of living the law. Amen. Love is the law, love under will. Hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys on the next one.